A lilac is blooming on a fence post in the next county that has not belonged to my family in 17 years. My grandmother planted it the year before I was born. She died in 2008. The house sold the next spring, and twice more after that. There is a trampoline in the yard now. The mailbox has a name on it I do not recognize, but last May, driving back from a job, I took a road I had not been on in over a decade. There it was, same corner, same fence post, in full bloom. The smell hit me before I rolled the window down. I sat in the car for a long time. That lilac has outlived my grandmother by 18 years. It will probably outlive me too. Here's what the garden center will not tell you. Annuals are a subscription. Perennials are an inheritance. The 7 plants in this video are the second kind. Number 5 blooms for 6 straight months. Number 3 has not changed since 1906. And number 1 is that lilac. Subscribe before we start. Let us start with the 2 plants that will stop a visitor mid-sentence the first time they see your border in bloom. Architecture, drama, flowers that look like they were carved instead of grown. Number 7, bearded iris pharaoh. Thutmose III had this flower carved into the walls of the Temple of Karnak around 1480 before Christ. He had just come back from a military campaign in Syria, and he brought iris specimens back to Egypt as part of the spoils. The carvings are still there. You can walk into the Botanical Garden Chamber at Karnak today and see them. 3,500 years ago, somebody looked at a bearded iris and decided it was important enough to be cut into stone. Nothing else in the room is a flower, just the iris. The genus name comes from Iris, the Greek goddess of the rainbow, because of the color range on the petals. The fleur-de-lis on the French royal crest, used since King Louis VII in the 12th century, is a stylized iris, not a lily. The kings of France had been wearing this flower on their armor for 600 years before anyone started planting it for fun. Most of the foundational modern hybrids were bred in the 1840s by a Parisian nurseryman called Jean-Nicolas Lemon at his nursery in Belleville. He crossed wild species from Europe and the Near East and produced the first iris cultivars with the vertical standards and arching falls we now think of as standard. Every modern bearded iris in cultivation today descends from his work. The plant itself is built like a piece of architecture. The rhizome sits on top of the soil, half exposed, soaking up sun. The fan of gray-green sword leaves rises straight up from it. In May or early June, the flower stalk shoots 3 feet into the air, and the buds open one at a time over 2 weeks. Standards up, falls out. The fuzzy beard that gives the plant its name, running down the center of each fall like a velvet stripe. The color range is genuinely absurd. Pure white, black purple, apricot, lemon yellow, bronze, blue with a yellow beard. The variety called Beverly Sills, bred by B. Warburton in 1979, is coral pink and won the Dykes Medal in 1985, which is the highest honor in iris breeding. Superstition is so dark it reads as black against a pale fence. Immortality is white and reblooms again in autumn. There are over 50,000 registered cultivars. In 2014, I dug up 5 rhizomes from the back border of an abandoned farmhouse my friend was renovating. Nobody knew the variety. Nobody had planted them in over 20 years. They were sitting in dry shade, half strangled by bindweed, and still flowering. I pulled them out of the dirt with my hands, brought them home in a paper bag, and stuck them in a sunny bed along the side of my driveway. They now spread across 2 meters. Every May, 15 to 20 deep purple flowers open over the course of a fortnight. The farmhouse has been demolished. The barn collapsed 2 years ago. The driveway it stood on is now somebody else's, but the iris is in my garden. And it will be in my garden for the rest of my life, and probably in someone else's after that. Plant the rhizome shallow. Full sun, divide every 4 years if it gets crowded. Otherwise, leave it. Think of it as a flower that turns a border into a cathedral for 2 weeks every May. The most striking things in a garden are rarely the things you have to fight for. Sometimes the best plants are the ones already growing in someone else's neglect, waiting for somebody to notice. Number 6. Oriental poppy. The first time you see an oriental poppy fully open, you assume someone is selling silk. The petals are crepe paper, thin, slightly creased, with the kind of texture you only see on hand-folded fabric. each flower is the size of a child's open hand. The center is solid black, ringed by a crown of dark stamens, and the contrast against the petal color is genuinely shocking. People stop in the middle of conversations. They lean in. They reach out to touch one before they know they're doing it. The plant came out of the mountains of Turkey, the southern Caucasus, and northern Iran. It was first collected for European gardens in the late 1700s by the French botanist Joseph Pitton de Tournefort during his expedition through the Ottoman Empire under King Louis XIV. He sent specimens back to the Royal Garden in Paris in 1702. By the late 1800s, Oriental poppies had become a staple of English country borders. Then in 1927, the American painter Georgia O'Keeffe painted red poppy. The painting hangs at the Art Institute of Chicago. She was not painting the flower. She was painting what it does to the person looking at it. Here is the thing nobody warns you about. The Oriental poppy gives you everything for 2 weeks in late spring. Then it disappears. The foliage yellows in early summer, dies back, and the entire plant goes dormant by July. The hole it leaves behind in the border is significant. New gardeners panic. They assume they have killed it. They have not. The taproot is 2 feet deep. The plant is asleep. It is conserving energy for the following May, when it will come back larger than it was the year before. The variety called Beauty of Livermere, bred in England in the 1930s, is the iconic blood red. Patty's plum is dusty mauve, bred by the English gardener Sandra Pope at her Hadspan Garden Nursery in Somerset in the 1990s. As a chance seedling she found in her own border. Royal Wedding is pure white with a black center. Princess Victoria Louise is salmon pink. I planted Beauty of Livermere in 2018 along the back fence. First spring, 3 blooms. Second spring, 11. Last May, I counted 26 flowers open in a single Saturday afternoon. The neighbor from 2 houses down rang the doorbell to ask what they were. She had been driving past for 4 years and had never seen them in bloom because the window is so short. By the following Saturday, they were gone. The leaves yellowed within 10 days. The hole in the border looked like I had dug something out by accident. I planted 3 Russian sages in front of them that summer. By July, the gap is invisible. By the next May, the poppies push up through the sage like they are remembering they had business to attend to. If this list is changing how you think about your borders, hit subscribe and the bell. Number 5 is the perennial that won Plant of the Centenary at Chelsea, and we are getting close. Plant Oriental poppies in autumn, full sun, deep soil. Do not move them once they are in. The taproot does not forgive transplanting. Think of it as a plant that gives you 2 weeks of fireworks and then politely leaves the stage for everyone else. Beauty does not have to last all year to be worth planting. Sometimes the most powerful thing a flower can do is bloom hard, leave space, and come back larger next spring. Now we move into the 3 plants that build the engine of a garden. Not one moment of drama, months of it. The plants that quietly outperform everything around them, while everyone else is busy looking somewhere else. Number 5, hardy geranium, Roseanne. This is the plant that beat every perennial introduced in the last 100 years. In 2013, the Royal Horticultural Society held a vote at the Chelsea Flower Show to mark the show's 100th anniversary. They asked horticulturalists, breeders, and judges to choose the single most important perennial introduced since 1913. They called it Plant of the Centenary. The winner was a hardy geranium called Roseanne, not a rose, not a peony. A small mounding plant with violet blue flowers that almost nobody had heard of 15 years earlier. The story of how it got there is genuinely strange. In 1989, a married couple named Donald and Roseanne Waterer were walking through their garden in Kilva on the Somerset coast in southwest England. They noticed an unfamiliar geranium seedling that had appeared on its own near a clump of 2 existing varieties. It had larger flowers than either parent. The color was a deeper violet blue. Most importantly, it kept blooming, week after week, month after month. They had no idea what it was. Neither did anyone they showed it to. It took 11 years for botanists at Bressingham Gardens in Norfolk to confirm what they were looking at. Roseanne was a sterile hybrid. Sterile because the chromosomes from her 2 parents did not match cleanly. Sterile meant she could never set seed. And because she could never set seed, she never stopped trying. The plant pushes flower after flower from May until the first hard frost in November. 6 months of continuous bloom. No deadheading, no fertilizing, no fuss. It was named after Roseanne Waterer in 2000. She lived to see it become the most planted perennial geranium in the world. Donald lived to see it win Plant of the Centenary in 2013. Other hardy geraniums are worth knowing. Brookside is a deeper blue. Johnson's blue was the standard before Roseanne arrived. Anne Folkert has magenta flowers against chartreuse foliage. None of them bloom for half the year. I planted Roseanne in a front border in 2020. By the second summer, she had spread into a soft mound about 3 feet across, weaving through everything around her. The flowers came up in May. They were still coming up in October. The neighbor across the street stopped me 4 times in 3 years to ask what it was. The first 3 times, she nodded and kept walking. The 4th time, she came back 10 minutes later with a notebook and a pen. That is the test. A plant that makes a non-gardener walk back to her own house for a notebook is doing something the rest are not. If you have ever inherited a garden or planted one for someone you love, hit subscribe and the bell. Number 1 is closer than you think. Plant Roseanne in spring or autumn. Full sun to part shade. Average soil. Cut her back to the ground in late winter. She will return larger every year. Think of it as a plant that flowers half the year and asks for nothing in return. The greatest perennials are the ones that quietly keep working long after the gardener has stopped paying attention. They are not the loudest plants in the garden. They are usually the ones still blooming the day you stop looking. Number 4, Shasta Daisy. This is the flower a child draws when you ask a child to draw a flower. White petals, yellow center. 6-year-olds across 4 continents reach for the same crayons in the same order. There is something about this exact arrangement of parts that registers as the platonic ideal of a flower in the human brain. We do not know why. We just know it works. Here's what most people do not realize. The Shasta Daisy did not exist before 1891. It was made, engineered, built in California by a horticulturalist named Luther Burbank, who spent 17 years crossing 4 different daisy species at his experimental farm in Santa Rosa. He started in 1884 with the English Oxy daisy, which had small flowers but tough genetics. He crossed it with the Portuguese field daisy for size, then with the German Marguerite for whiteness, then, finally, with a Japanese variety called Nipponanthemum nipponicum to lock in cold tolerance. What he ended up with was a single flower, bigger, whiter, longer blooming, and tougher than any of its parents. He named it after Mount Shasta in Northern California because the petals reminded him of snow on the peak. He released it commercially in 1891. It immediately became the most popular new perennial of the late Victorian era and has not left the catalogs since. Burbank himself described the Shasta Daisy as one of the proudest creations of his career. The man bred over 800 new plant varieties in his lifetime, including the russet Burbank potato that became the foundation of the entire McDonald's French fry supply. He still considered the Shasta his masterpiece. The variety called Becky was named Perennial Plant of the Year in 2003. She is the most heat-tolerant of the modern Shasta cultivars, holding her stems upright in humidity that flattens every other daisy. Snowcap stays compact at 15 inches for smaller borders. Crazy Daisy has fringed petals that look hand-cut. I planted 3 Becky daisies along a fence line in 2019. They were on sale in the end-of-season clearance bin, $15 for the lot. The soil along that fence is heavy clay, root-bound from a maple tree, and almost nothing I had tried there before had survived a second summer. I stuck them in anyway, walked away. By 2023, those 3 plants had multiplied into a 60-foot ribbon of white that runs the entire length of the back fence. The dog used to walk past them every morning without noticing. Now he stops at the fence and watches the bumblebees work them like he has never seen anything before. My daughter cuts them for the kitchen table once a week from June through August. We have not bought cut flowers from a supermarket in 3 summers. Plant them in full sun, average soil. Divide the clumps every 3 or 4 years. They split clean and the divisions take immediately. Think of it as the flower a child draws, engineered into the toughest perennial Luther Burbank ever made. The simplest things in a garden are often the most carefully built. We have just stopped noticing the work behind them. Every white-petaled, yellow-centered daisy in your neighborhood traces back to one man bent over a row of seedlings in 19th century California, choosing which ones to keep and which ones to throw away. The daisy is not a wildflower. It is a sculpture that took 17 years to finish. Number 3. Peony. Sarah Bernhardt. The peony at the garden center this Saturday is the same plant that was sold in 1906. Not the same species, the same exact cultivar. Sarah Bernhardt, soft pink, fully double, intensely fragrant, was bred and introduced by the French nurseryman Victor Lemoyne at his nursery in Nancy in 1906. It was named after the legendary French stage actress, who was 62 years old that year, and at the height of her international fame, the plant has been in continuous cultivation for over 120 years. Every Sarah Bernhardt peony in the world today is genetically the same plant. Your great-grandmother's peony and the one in the plastic pot on the garden center trolley are clones of the same 19th century original. That is genuinely unusual. Most ornamental plants get reformulated, rebranded, replaced. New cultivars push out the old ones. Sarah Bernhardt has outlasted 4 world wars, the entire arc of the modern plant breeding industry, and the deaths of every breeder who ever tried to compete with her. Nobody has improved on her. Not in over a century of trying. Peonies have been cultivated in China since at least the Sui dynasty in the 6th century. Empress Wu Zetian, the only woman ever to rule China as emperor in her own name, commissioned massive imperial peony gardens at her capital city of Luoyang in the late 7th century. They are still there. Modern Luoyang holds an annual peony festival every April that draws over 20 million visitors. The peony reached Japan in the 8th century via Buddhist monks. It reached Europe by the 17th century. The explosion of modern hybrids came from Lemoine and his son Emile in Nancy between 1890 and 1920. A peony tuber wants to be planted shallow. The eyes, which are the small pink growth points, should sit 1 to 2 inches below the soil surface, no deeper. Plant it too deep and it will refuse to bloom for years, decades in some cases. Plant it correctly and leave it alone, and it will outlive you. Other cultivars worth knowing. Festiva Maxima is white with red flecks and was bred in 1851. It is the oldest commercially available peony cultivar still in cultivation. Coral Charm fades from coral to peach to butter yellow as it ages. A Bowl of Beauty has a single ring of pink petals around a center of cream stamens. I planted Sarah Bernhardt in spring 2014 from a bare root order. 3 knobby brown tubers that looked dead in the box. First year, 2 scraggly leaves, 0 blooms. Second year, 4 small flowers. Third year, 14. By 2020, every late May, the plant produced over 40 flowers in a single weekend. My daughter, who was 4 when I planted it, started cutting them for the kitchen table every spring without being asked. She is 15 now. The plant is in the same hole. The kitchen table is the same kitchen table. The flowers are the same flowers Victor Lemoyne bred in 1906. Plant in autumn or early spring, full sun, good drainage. Do not move once established. Think of it as a flower that has not been improved upon in over a century. Some plants do not need updating. They were built right the first time, and the only thing left to do is plant them and let them work. And now we are into the last 2. The plants that do not just come back every year. They carry the people who planted them. Number 2, daylily. This plant has been on the dinner plate longer than it has been in the flower bed. Daylilies have been cultivated in Chinese gardens for over 2,500 years. They appear in the Area, a Chinese encyclopedia compiled in the 3rd century before Christ, where they are documented as both an ornamental and a vegetable. The dried flower buds, called Huang Hua Kai, have been a staple of Chinese cuisine since the Han Dynasty and are still sold in markets across Asia today. Most people in the West have never eaten a daylily. Most people in China have never not. The botanical name Hemerocallis comes from the Greek words for day and beauty. Each flower opens at dawn, holds its color through the day, and closes by dusk. The next morning, a different bud opens beside it. Each scape produces 12 to 20 buds. Each plant sends up multiple scapes. From late May to early August, you have a fresh bouquet on the same plant every single morning. The variety called Stella d'Oro was bred in 1975 by an American breeder named Walter Jablonski in Indiana on a small backyard breeding program he ran out of his house. It is now the most planted daylily in the world. Happy returns. Reblooms more reliably. Pardon me, has red flowers with yellow throats. I planted 3 Stella d'Oro clumps in 2017, divided them once in 2021. I now have 11 clumps spread across 3 different beds, plus pieces I gave to 2 neighbors and a cousin in Edmonton who calls me every August to tell me they are blooming on her balcony. The first one I gave away traveled 3,000 kilometers in a paper bag. It is still alive. Cost of the original 3 plants, $24. Cost of the current display, still $24. Plant in full sun, average soil. Divide every 4 years if they get crowded. Think of it as a plant that pays interest in flowers and reinvests in itself. A plant that multiplies generously is teaching you something about gardening. It is also teaching you something about giving. The best perennials never stay in one yard for long. Number 1, lilac. This is the plant from the hook, the one on the fence post in the next county. The lilac came to Western Europe in 1562 when the Ottoman ambassador Ogier Ghiselin de Busbecq sent the first cuttings from Constantinople to the imperial court in Vienna. It reached England by 1597. It reached colonial America in the 1750s. The lilacs at the Governor Wentworth Estate in Portsmouth, New Hampshire, were planted in 1750 and are still blooming today. 275 years on the same patch of ground. In 1865, Walt Whitman wrote "When Lilacs Last" in the Dooryard bloom to mourn the assassination of Abraham Lincoln. The flower had become so tied to the American spring, to homesteads and farmhouses and dooryard borders, that Whitman did not need to explain why he chose it. Everyone reading him already knew. A lilac is technically a shrub, not a herbaceous perennial. It earns its place on this list anyway. It lives longer than most trees, blooms more reliably than most flowers, and asks for almost nothing in return. Lilac wood is so dense it sinks in water. Specimens routinely live 150 years. Some have been documented at over 200. The variety called Sensation has purple petals, edged in white, and was found as a chance branch sport in 1938. Beauty of Moscow is double white with pink buds, bred in 1947 at the Botanical Garden in Moscow. Miss Kim is compact and reblooms. My grandmother planted her lilac at the corner of the fence in 1963, the year she and my grandfather bought the farmhouse. She died in 2008. The house was sold the next spring. I had not been back to the property in over a decade when I drove past last May. The lilac was in full bloom. I sat in the car for a long time. Then I went home and ordered a Sensation lilac for my own front yard the next morning. It is not the same plant, but it is the same flower, and in 50 years, it will smell the same to my daughter as my grandmother's smelled to me. Think of it as a memory that keeps blooming. 7 plants. Each of them outlives the season you plant them in. Some of them outlive the gardener. Most gardening videos teach you what to plant this year. This one is about what to plant for 10 years from now, for 20, for someone you have not met yet. The truth is older than any of it. Pharaoh Thutmose carved an iris into stone in 1480 before Christ. Empress Wu Zetian planted peony gardens at Luoyang in the 7th century. Walt Whitman wrote about lilacs in 1865. Every gardener who ever lived before 1950 understood something we have collectively forgotten. A plant is not a season. It is a witness. It sees who plants it. It sees who waters it. And it keeps going long after both have stopped. You will not always be the gardener tending these plants. That is not a sad thought. It is the whole point. The lilac my grandmother planted in 1963 is blooming this May in a yard I will never live in, owned by a family that does not know my name. The smell of it stopped me on the road last spring, exactly the way it stopped her on the porch in the summer of '65. That is what a perennial is, not a plant. An inheritance you leave to people you have not met. Which plant in your garden was given to you by someone you loved? Drop it in the comments. Subscribe for the rest. The garden was never meant to be this much work. We just stopped planting the things that did the work for us.